Maybe this time I'll actually unmute myself. This is the third time on this attempt. In this video, I'm going to try to rank U.S. presidents on their effectiveness as president, along with their character. Big thing of mine. I'm in no ways a master historian, but I find that I am pretty wise when it comes to presidential history. I think it's interesting how certain things presidents can do can affect our country for years down the road, centuries even. Going to see examples of that later on. But I'll start with where I usually start, unrankable presidents, basically presidents within my history that haven't done enough, especially like Trump and Biden, who are, in office and going to take office. We don't have enough history on them. And there's one more guy in here. Nope, not Reagan. Bush. The other Bush. So I'm going to go through this a little faster now because I spent 20 minutes already on this. Nixon's a guy I think gets scrutinized too much for just the Watergate scandal. He's obviously going to pull our troops out of Vietnam, and our country is going to be good. There's a reason why he won a landslide victory in his second second attempt at office. Some guy who was not good as Andrew Johnson. I hope that flickering isn't in this video, but Andrew Johnson's a guy who follows Lincoln. Just did nothing to stop or to reconstruct the Union. If we would have had more Andrew Johnsons, our country would probably be split right now. We'd probably have just like Korea, we'd have a North and a South United States probably with them. It's not going to be until presidents after him where we're going to really see a reconstruction. Zachary Taylor, he's our fourth shortest term to president. I don't know, between him and Gerald Ford. He's obviously going to lead into the Compromise of 1850, but he's going to die before it's able to be passed. Really does nothing as a president. He's going to die at a July 4th party from drinking bad water. Jimmy Carter, I really can't put him F because he's just a remarkable guy. The presidency it just took a toll on him. Obviously, the Iran hostage crisis, which he feels bad for even to this day, and just didn't do a lot. He's down there as probably the worst Democratic president within the no, I shouldn't say that. One of the worst Democratic presidents in the 20th century. We're not going to have a lot of them, to be fair. John Quincy Adams, again, he's the smartest president. I think he had an IQ of 174. Remarkable. The smartest president, most qualified president. Obviously he's the son of John Adams, the founding father. But he's basically going to pass a bunch of tariffs that are really going to lead. And they're not directly going to lead to the Panic of 1837, but they're definitely setting our country off to that. And then obviously he comes president because he pools votes together to win the presidency, and the corrupt bargain is what we call it. Thomas Jefferson, again, a guy that if he wasn't such a crap hole person in his character, I would argue S for him, but it's kind of hard to, because basically he did a bunch of things in spite, like he doesn't like a standing militia and ends up setting West Point off, which will bring a lot of our good generals in, like Ulysses Grant, and I think Dwight Eisenhower's came out of West Point as well. the Louisiana Purchase, even though he doesn't like a strong federal government, and it was kind of unconstitutional to make purchases of land. But altogether, other than him fathering a bunch of children with a slave girl, he basically was just a widower president his entire presidency, but got a lot done. He's one of 3 presidents to die on July 4th, and he's going to die the same day as John Adams of would that be 1826, 1827? A guy I don't know a lot about, Grover Cleveland. The only thing I know about him is that he fathered a child with, or not, he may have fathered a child, but he was a groomer. But I know that things during his time was a little difficult when it came to immigration, and he was a little less strict on it compared to other guys that are going to come up. Guy that, I don't like him because he's co-founder, probably main founder of the political party system and running under political parties. He's not going to be the first one to run under one of the 2 modernized parties, but he's the second one, and he's the vice president under the person who's going to be the first person. Obviously, the Trail of Tears, I think, actually happens under him, although he doesn't enact the laws that come to it. But the Trail of Tears is going to happen, and he's going to be ignorant for anything that doesn't happen, that's not pertaining to the white man, other than land. A white, I guess. Yeah. He's also, native tongue is Dutch, and he's the first president born after the Revolutionary War, which makes him the first U.S. citizen president. Wouldn't see it from this picture there, but he is. Something I've heard about John Quincy Adams is he's a really good Secretary of State. He ends up coining a lot of the big documents during James Monroe's time, including the Monroe Doctrine, which we'll talk about later. Ulysses Grant, I like Grant a lot. History's looking nicer to him as of late, because he was an anti-racist guy. The Reconstruction's not going to end under him, but it's going to be sped up because he's going to follow Andrew Johnson. He's going to kick the KKK. He's going to start kicking down monopolies. But obviously, what hinders him is his foreign policy, or not foreign policy, maybe it is, but his the corruption, which I don't really consider his fault. Obviously, a Civil War general, and probably our most drunken president ever, other than. Speaking of which, up next, Franklin Pierce, him and Ulysses Grant are probably the most drunken presidents. Franklin Pierce, I feel bad for him. When I finish this F tier, he's probably going to be up there at the top of the F tier. Because 3 of his sons died. I don't believe when he was president, but one of them died when he was going to take oath of office. He's going to die in a train crash, and his wife just hates him. He's going to end up drinking himself to death. The doctor said, if you don't quit drinking, you're going to die. And he's like, I don't care. My life sucks. Which I kind of feel bad for. He's gonna sign the Kansas-Nebraska Act, an extension of the Missouri Compromise and the Compromise of 1850. Basically meaning, if you're in Nebraska or Kansas, if you go there, you can decide if it's a slave state or not, which is just ignoring the Missouri Compromise, which is going to lead to Bleeding Kansas, which is really like the first part of the Civil War. He's going to do nothing about it, really. Another guy's going to do nothing is Warren Harding. I don't know how much time I got to spend on him. He's the first president when women can vote. for president, which is kind of interesting to me. He basically, his big quote is that he shouldn't have been president. Ironic. I don't want him to be president either. As a matter of fact, I'm going to put Pierce over him because at least Pierce had a little bit of morals. He basically just gambled, drank, and just was a loser. William McKinley, he's our third president to get assassinated in office. The biggest negative on him is the Philippine-American War. He's going to lead us out of the Spanish-American War, but the Philippine-American War is, if you thought Vietnam was pointless, learn about the Philippine-American War. Reagan is a guy, I could put him A. Sadly enough, I don't know if I know enough about his presidency. I just know that things went well for him. That's what historians consider to him. He was very blessed. One of my favorite quotes from him, probably one of the greatest moments in U.S. history, is when he says, "Mr. Gorbachev, break down this wall." Basically, just wasn't an end to the Cold War. Because the Cold War's gonna really end before this. But really, just a big guy on foreign policy. I know a lot of people don't like Reaganomics, and I'm not enough to speak about it. It's the polarizing part of his presidency, I know. Just an economic system to bring our country back to order. He's going to follow Jimmy Carter, which we know Jimmy Carter didn't do a lot for our country. Probably my favorite president, George Washington. He's one of the guys that just didn't do anything, but you just automatically put him S. He didn't do anything really, other than really just set the standard for our country. Retired after two terms, and denounced political parties and good foreign policy and affairs with other countries, which is going to really, he's going to inspire all the other 47 presidencies afterwards. Obviously, he's Revolutionary War general, probably overrated in that regard, but when it comes to, early founding father speakers, he's number one on my list. Just rallies and brings together groups of people. John Adams, he's going to sit there with his son. I don't know which one of the two is worse. Probably John Adams. He's going to sign Alien and Sedition Acts, which are going to be in place for the next 150 or so years. And it's going to inspire the likes of people like Abraham Lincoln and then Woodrow Wilson during World War I, which during times of war, you can't speak out against the president, which was happening during the Quasi-War, which is what was happening during his presidency, which is not a war, it's a war that didn't see really any bloodshed, but it was basically just a preliminary, or predecessor, maybe you can say, to the Cold War. Is pretty similar. We all know he's a good founding father. I don't think he's one of the few that, well, I wouldn't say one of the few because I think most of them didn't, but one of the many founding fathers that didn't own slaves. Actually, studying my history class, I learned that when the Constitution was being in place, his wife Abigail was basically like, remember the ladies, they have rights too, and he's like, nah, they don't got rights, and just ignored her. It's kind of funny. It kind of shows you what his presidency was. He's not F, because he didn't do anything that was just ignorant, which is, I think, where I'm going to put guys in here. It's just ignorant presidents, but he certainly was pretty bad. Just Arthur, I don't know enough about him. Supposedly he could be our first Canadian president. Hopefully our only, if that's the case. But he was born in very, very northern Vermont. And he's going to try and tackle, one of the many presidents at that time, trying to tackle immigration into our country. Around this time, he's going to be dealing with Chinese immigration. Later on, our country is going to deal with European immigration. But I know he tackled a lot of the monopolies at the time. Just an extension of Grant's administration. Cleveland's administration, we'll see. Taft, most rotund president. I think he was like 350. He's one of the two presidents I visited the gravesite for, which if you know where Taft's buried, you'll know who the second guy is. He'll be coming down the line. He was an American guy. I feel bad for him because when he was running for a second term, Teddy Roosevelt, who we'll get into later, was going to be the Republican nominee, but because they wouldn't support Roosevelt, he ran under a third party, and Taft would have won that election of 1812, but he didn't because of Teddy Roosevelt, which is kind of sad. I really like Teddy Roosevelt. He's just a huge, no pun intended, huge president, huge American president. He also loved his bathtubs too. Ford, I feel like I should probably put him unrankable. I don't know enough about what he did. He's one of the shortest presidencies and really just was a filler president when Nixon resigned. So just really an extension of his presidency. I always say he's Andrew Garfield, but he's not Spider-Man. He's James Garfield, James F. Garfield. Basically the biggest what-if president. If you don't know enough about him, I would Google him. He probably would have rivaled Abraham Lincoln in what he was trying to accomplish. He was running under a civil rights program that would give rights to African Americans, but he was just shot not even 4 months into his presidency by Charles Guiteau in a train station. I think he was actually going on vacation at that time. Unfortunate. A very morally astute guy. A guy I would not say is very morally astute, but you just gotta put him A. He's gonna rise to power, one of the many guys, because of his leading of battles. Three of these four guys, I guess if I have Reagan here too, 3 of these 5 guys are going to be prominent generals in battles. George Washington in the Revolutionary War. We said Ulysses Grant during Civil War, and Andrew Jackson during the War of 1812. He's going to win a monumentous battle in the Battle of New Orleans. But obviously his big tarnish, and I think I'm going to put him back down to B, is that he just did not like Native Americans, found them inferior. Trail of Tears the Trail of Tears, as we said, falls really under Van Buren, but he's going to enact the Indian Removal Act. He's the last president where we don't have national debt. Big guy in infrastructure in our country. He didn't establish and I'm forgetting the word, but renewed the bank charter. So we're gonna have a crash under him. He also just is this guy that just loves killing people. He had one of the first assassination attempts where a guy tried to shoot him twice with 2 different guns, but that misfired. Ends up almost beating the dude to death. I watched a video the other day of him when he got into one of his infamous duels. He basically was like, "Here, you go first." The guy shot him in the chest, and probably a spot he should have died, and didn't flinch, and ends up killing the guy, which is like really astounding. And he ends up having this bullet in his chest his whole life. No pun intended to James Garfield, who should have had a bullet in his chest his whole life, because his doctors killed him. But thankfully, Andrew Jackson's doctors, they didn't take the bullet out of him. Someone that, I know this sounds really bad, should have had a bullet through him. That's really bad. That's really bad. My bad. But James Buchanan, he's going to be the president right before the Civil War. He's actually going to follow this guy underneath, right behind him, Abraham Lincoln. He's going to do nothing to stop the states from succeeding. Basically, he understands there's a problem, but just says he's not going to do anything about it, unfortunately. A guy I probably need to spend a whole 2 seconds on, Abraham Lincoln. I mean, it's between these two who's the best. I mean, who enacted the better system was obviously Abraham Lincoln, but George Washington had 0 negatives on his record. Abraham Lincoln, the only negative to him, and probably that's the only thing we need to focus on, because we obviously know he freed the slaves, not with the Emancipation Proclamation like people think, but with the 13th Amendment, which is going to sign into law. Basically, the Emancipation Proclamation is going to be an executive order to free the slaves. So the 13th Amendment puts it into place. But the biggest thing on Abraham Lincoln, like John Adams, is what we call suspending habeas corpus. Basically, anyone that spoke out against him or the Civil War was going to go into prison. And a lot of people are, I shouldn't say a lot, but a few people are going to go into prison because of that. But, I mean, like, you wanna hear someone that's just an incredible human being, look up Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address. Probably the greatest speech ever given in our country's history. Talk about a good speaker, FDR. I can't quite put him S, because he did have some negatives. Obviously, the New Deal is this polarizing thing. Whether or not you like it or not, it's going to bring into play our modernized working situations, like the 9 to 5. That's kind of a joke in our country. It's going to be under his policies. And really just him getting us out of the Great Depression, World War I, or World War II, is why he's so astute. What he did, well, like the Japanese internment camps, probably one of the biggest hindrances in our country's history, is going to fall into play. Obviously, he's just a good moral guy. He liked to portray himself, even with his weakness of polio, as this guy that has an important role, and that's why he's going to try and go for 4 terms. He's not going to be able to live for that 4th term. He's going to die, complications of polio. But just a good guy. But the Japanese internment camps, which is not like the worst thing when it came to atrocities during World War II, considering what a lot of the Axis powers were doing, and then what the Soviets are going to end up doing, and then what the Chinese are going to end up doing after World War II. But he's a good guy who was president during the most difficult time in our country's history. Eisenhower, who's going to not follow him, but he's going to follow his predecessor, his vice president, Harry Truman. He runs under the campaign We Like Ike. Another one up here that's a huge war general. He's going to be general during World War II. He establishes the interstate highway system, which is going to greatly improve our infrastructure in our country, where you can travel and goods can be sent from place to place. Every one of us has traveled on one of these interstates that he's set apart. Good guy. He's gonna really start those 2 big wars. Not gonna start them, but he's gonna be because of his military character. He's gonna kind of set our precedent. And I mean, even I don't think he wasn't president during Vietnam War, at least not to my knowledge. And I don't know if he was president during the Korean War either, but he's going to be around that time, or our country is going to be moving towards getting ourselves into the affairs of other countries, which would make sense if he was president during the Vietnam War, because that would kind of be what he would be about. The guy, I gotta put him down there, is Herbert Hoover, president before and I guess kind of during the Great Depression. He's going to do nothing to stop it other than sign this one law that's going to be a catalyst for it, which is the Smoot-Hawley tariff. Going to do nothing for it. Teddy Roosevelt, a guy who is probably the biggest, not patriot, but hardcore guy in our country. S might be a little overstating it there. But again, a guy that he didn't really have many negatives on his presidency. And he's going to just really bring our country up. And I guess in a time when he wasn't present during a difficult time. And he was president when he set up the national park system, fortunately, and he's a big naturalist. Would always just take hikes during the presidency. I don't know if being president was a favorable thing for him. I mean, obviously he was, and he definitely ran for re-election because he ends up becoming vice president. But really just loved to be outdoors. There's a story of him making a boat when his boat gets stolen, and he ends up chasing after the people who steal his boat. Just tells you. The funny thing about him, he died really young. He was one of the youngest presidents in our history. He ends up dying in his sleep, and the joke is that nature had to take Teddy in his sleep, or else there would have been a fight. Which kind of just tells you about his character. Definitely the weaker of the three up here, but well deserving. Millard Fillmore, you could argue down an F. Probably should be an F. He's his predecessors, Zachary Taylor, kind of gets started with the Compromise of 1850, and the Fugitive Slave Act is under him. Or basically, if you're an African-American slave, you get free. You're going to just be sent back, no matter your freedom and your status. Not a great guy, and he's the last of our Whig presidents. None of the four being very remarkable. James Polk. He is probably my favorite Democratic president in our history. I'm kind of lacking of Democratic presidents other than these two. 3 of the 5 up here are Republican. Basically, he's gonna bring us into the Mexican-American War, but he's also gonna lead us out of it. He's gonna annex Texas, and he's gonna bring in the most area in our nation's history. Which, if you live west of the Mississippi, you probably are living in land that he purchased in his life. Other than if you live in like the Midwest, he's gonna get Utah and California and Oregon and Washington. Obviously, he's gonna get Texas. Some of the most populous areas in our country, probably the most populous outside of New York. California and Texas are like our 2 biggest states. Woodrow Wilson. Yeah, you're going down. I want to put him D. He used to be ranked as like a top 5 president in our country, and he slipped down to like the 20s now. Very racist. The one good thing about his presidency was the women's suffrage. Women are able to vote, which just led to this guy right here. So good job, Woodrow Wilson, for signing a law. Probably was your wife. I could have signed it too, because he had a stroke in his presidency that brought us Warren Harding. So thanks a lot for that. He's going to be racist. He's going to sign a stupid prohibition law that's going to just make our country mad. He's going to bring the KKK back after this guy knocked it down. Most people aren't going to put him behind Johnson and Pierce and Buchanan, but he certainly is pretty bad considering the era he was in. He did nothing for World War One other than say he wasn't going to join the war and end up joining the war. Really dumb. Harry Truman, I have a lot of credit for him because he is going to establish where I'm from, one of the Manhattan Project sites. I grew up, as the Queen song says, tall and proud in the shadow of the mushroom cloud. Not looking too highly nowadays for the nuclear weapons that are going to be passed under his administration. I consider that, although not morally correct to drop a bomb, especially a nuclear weapon, on a country, but it was necessary considering the circumstances of our country. And if you think otherwise, I urge you to just kind of look at the historian perspective of it, of why it could be good. I know it's not good to take lives, but it saves so many American troops. And if I'm looking to save Japanese lives or American lives, I'm saving American lives. Considering the atrocities the Japanese were in place, we oftentimes talk about the concentration camps happening within Germany under German command, and I guess also under Austria-Hungary command as well. But the Japanese were just on the same level, especially what they were doing to the Chinese. Harry Truman shares the same birthday as me, which I give a lot of credit to him for. John F. Kennedy, I feel like is probably our most overrated president. And considering what people immortalize him to be, he didn't really do what people expect him to have done. Obviously he's probably our greatest speaking president of all time, especially when he says stuff like, ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. Or we choose to go to the moon and other things in this decade, not because they're easy, but because they're hard. He's really going to bring a country together, considering the circumstances of the wars that are going to be put to play. Not as much as his successor's going to do, but he's going to definitely do a lot for the Korean War in making, I'm missing the word here, but just making it bigger. A war that really could have just pulled troops out of at any moment. And obviously the Bay of Pigs and his trying of overthrowing the Cuban government, which isn't great, considering what that's going to bring to Cuba in the following decades, even up until today. Alright, I think I was about to get to Calvin Coolidge. But Calvin Coolidge, probably the most relatable president to me because he was so quiet. Had a story where essentially a reporter said, I bet that I can make you say more than 2 words, and he just says, you lose. He's one of the 2 presidents I consider just did not see the presidency as a defining moment. He's obviously going to be president because Warren Harding is going to end up dying in office. He's going to sign one of the acts that's pretty damaging in our country that revokes immigration into our country. Which, whether or not you see immigration as important or not, it has been an important factor in our country. Every single one of us unless you're a Native American. Even then, probably if you're Native American, benefits from immigration. So yeah, that's something that happened under his presidency. John Tyler, um, because he's a Confederate sympathist. See, I don't have problems with some of the characters of Confederate people, like Robert E. Lee. I know he fought for the wrong side, but Robert E. Lee had good character. John Tyler just didn't. His own party didn't even favor him. He's going to be the first president in our country. Basically just was an ignorant guy, and he would have taken the rights of where Jefferson Davis was as the Confederate state president, but ends up dying before then. Which I don't know enough about Jefferson Davis whether or not John Tyler would have been better or not. But it's just really sad. He was a Southern sympathizer. What they say at the time, a doughface. A lot of doughfaces down here. For some reason, there's a lot of black and white photos here. Senator Woodrow Wilson. He did serve in a black and white time, but could have very easily had a colorized picture of him. James Madison. I'll go B. I'll go B with James Madison. Obviously, his presidency was his pre-presidency was a lot better than his presidency. The War of 1812 is going to happen under his watch. He's not going to do a lot to stop it, or you do a lot to cause it. The burning of the White House is going to happen under him, but he's the father of our nation. We say that's George Washington, but it's really we're living under a James Madison country. He's going to adopt the Constitution. He's going to write it. And many of the important documents he's going to be there for. But obviously the War of 1812 is a difficult time, and he's going to be there in a time where it's establishing the country with the bank, whether or not to charter a bank or not. Benjamin Harrison's not a guy I looked very highly on, other than the fact that my state became a state under him, and I think it was 1887. The first Wounded Knee massacre is going to happen under his watch. Nor did he care for the Native American, what was happening for the Native Americans, but he wasn't ignorant in his policies, unlike any of these guys were. William Henry Harrison, I don't really rank him. He had 31 days. His wife wasn't even packed up to enter the White House. He gave the longest speech. He's another one of our huge military generals. Was a general during the War of 1812. Good for him. Rutherford Hayes. You could argue C. I think I'll go D with him. Reconstruction technically happens under him. The way that he does it isn't immaculate, nor was he. You could consider that he wasn't elected president because somehow 101% of South Carolina voted in that election. I mean, I'm sure probably most of that was for Samuel Tilden, who was anti-Reconstruction. Rutherford, I mean, kind of just, he was an extension of what was happening at the time between Grant and Cleveland and Garfield. I should put him C. If I have Cleveland at C, he's C. Lyndon Johnson. Oh my gosh. You want to learn about Lyndon Johnson? He's a crazy individual. Funny, weird guy. He loves having people see him naked. He loved his ding-a-ling, that's for sure. He's going to intensify the Vietnam War. He's going to be a very Messiah complex guy. One good thing for him is the civil rights, but we all know that was really John F. Kennedy's doing, and then Lyndon Johnson was just a benefactor of that. And finally, last but not least, he's definitely not the last or worst president, James Monroe. He has an entire era named after just a good time in presidential in American history, one of the best times, the era of good feelings. He's going to he's one of the best presidents in our history with kicking down the external affairs, the foreign policy in our country. He basically just says, we just went through a Revolutionary War, we went through the French and Indian War, and we've gone through the War of 1812. No need for another war. It's pointless and dumb. Why not? If you stay out of our business, we'll stay out of yours, and that's really gonna happen until we consider World War One. There's a couple different things that happened between then that I guess weren't exactly European based, but had European powers in, like the Philippine American War and Spanish American War. But it's really not going to be until World War One until we break that with this piece of junk here. I mean, there wasn't a lot of bad that happened under his presidency. It also wasn't a very difficult time, and also he didn't really draft some of those important documents. It was this guy who drafted them, John Quincy Adams. But John Quincy Adams isn't going to be president until after those things happen. Anyways, that's my ranking. If I were to put a top 5 on this list, obviously those 3, and probably Ike, and then FDR. Maybe make room for Thomas Jefferson. If I were to put my bottom 5 pretty easily, it's going to be Andrew Johnson, Franklin Pierce, James Buchanan, Woodrow Wilson, and then probably Warren Harding. So yeah, I hope you like that. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching.